you son of a bitch. Hey everybody, thanks for coming back. This is part 6 on Wes's Sonoma build. This time around we're going to start skinning this turkey. That means the cow combo's going in, the top skin for the cow combo's going on, and the inner bed skin's getting built. So to make that happen, we're going to use the ghetto bender, the bead roller, and my new favorite thing, Clecos. That's a lie, my favorite thing is dimple dye, you all know that. Before I close all that stuff up, you need to make sure that this retractable license plate frame can actually be disassembled and brought out through the opening. I'm going to come in here and mock up the opening about the size that I think it's going to be and practice reaching in to actually get access to everything. Alright, got this outer skin mocked up with a piece of ram board. First part of taking this out is taking off the license plate bracket. Now this just comes right out through the top. Next step is take out the actuator. Now I'm going to have to go underneath the truck and pull out the bolt that holds the bottom side of the actuator. And just pull the carriage up, pull the actuator out. Now it's time to get the carriage out. I'm going to start by taking the brackets out on the bottom to hold the traveling rods. Once those brackets are out of the way, I can thread the traveling rods out from the top plate. With that, the brackets come right out. And the carriage down, these rods just go in hand tight. The space being tight in here, it's nice that the license plate bracket comes out through the top. So that leaves this opening here where you can bring the travel rods up through there. Which should allow me, hopefully, to manipulate this baby up out of here.
Wrong.
That was a bit of a fail. This piece wasn't cardboard, I never would have gotten that thing out of there. I took the traveling carriage, gave it a little haircut, basically took the corners off and brought the ends in just as tight as I could get them where the bushings are. Now, very carefully you are able to thread this thing in here. That tells me two things. One, putting this together is not going to be a whole lot of fun, but I kind of knew that anyway. And two, this opening can't be a whole lot smaller than it is right now. This is why you do mock-ups like this. You got to think ahead. Make sure you don't screw yourself in the end. I always try to keep everything serviceable. Alright, roll pan brace time. The brace is going to come across here, straight up, inside this cut for the cow combo. Bring a piece up, fold it over, and attach it back to the inner bedside right here. I trace this out along the edge, right here, the roll pan. And this baby sits in there, something like that. Squared it up to the bedsides, make sure that it's run level. Reference mark along here, along the edge, cut that edge off, tape this together, clean up this little template. Got the piece cut out, got the spot marked where I'm going to do the bend. Here's my little ghetto brake setup. It's Harbor Freight, no big surprise. I have made a couple little improvements to it. Straight out of the box, you got this plate to do all your bending against. The idea is you clamp this plate down with a series of C-clamps or whatever you've got, and then you make your bend. Problem is this thing bows around a lot. I drilled and tapped the base of it for some 3/8/16 bolts that I through bolt through this bending plate. It helps to put the thing in the same place so that the bends are a little bit more repeatable. This way what I've found is I can just take my little mark wherever the bend's supposed to go, get it lined up with this edge, put the bolts in it, run it down, and it also helps to keep this plate flat. So here's how that works. Now, even with this bolted down, wants to bow a little bit right here. May not make any difference, so I will throw a clamp right in here just to help keep it flat. Beyond that, just grab and go. There you go. Despite it being from Harbor Freight, does a pretty decent job. Let's go check this out on the truck. Here we are all bent up. Let's see what we got. Alright, that works out pretty good. Here you get a better idea what's going on with the roll pan brace. This bottom support tube catches the roll pan down at the very end. It's welded to the roll pan support braces that we put in a while back. Runs along, connects over to these boxes, welded to the bedsides in order to hold the roll pan nice and tight. This should just give a little bit of extra support in case Wes ever knocks a roll pan off the ground. Not much, but hopefully it'll save it from getting ripped off after it's been painted. You might have noticed in past videos there's a bit of a fitment problem with the cow combo to the bedsides. This bed's tweaked in a couple different directions. So what I had to do was added a a couple of eyelet bolts to the bed sides. I threw a ratchet strap in here to suck the bed sides in. That did a lot of good for the fitment of this thing. It's going to help tighten up the gaps when it comes time to weld it up. Alright, so now it's time to start putting the skin in here. Bent up some flanges out of more of the same 18 gauge. These pieces are going to go along the bottom here and up the sides, something like this. Another piece on the side. And in the end, these will all be sitting flush with this tube and with this flange. In order to line up all these flanges I'm installing, run this piece of angle iron, clamp it to these flanges. That gives me a straight line all the way across so I can make sure all my flanges are in line with each other. Clamp this in place. Keep everything running flat on the same plane. Now I can drill this out, throw some clecos in it, get all the flanges built and put in place, start working on the inner bed skin. Drilling these holes just reminded me of something. I was doing the license plate bracket, put these nut inserts in here, but I didn't realize at the time, this is like a 1/4 inch wall tube. I mean, this thing is pretty friggin' beefy. It's part of the body drop. If I'd known that, I just would have drilled and tapped those holes. Whatever. Got the side flange in place, located it at the outside, this upper tube with another piece of angle iron, clamped down here with this angle iron, captured against this lower flange. And I love these clecos. Where have these things been my whole life? Got all the flanges in, use my little bender to bend these things up. Cut them to length, clecoed them in, no problem. Now it's time to move on, start doing some skin on the outside. So I got a piece of ram board cut that fits this opening. Lay it on there, start getting everything lined up. Use some magnets to hold it in place. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the backside along all these flanges, along all these tubes. So as I start to lay out the bead rolls that are going in this thing, I make sure I leave myself plenty of space. Well, you pussy ass magnet. So I got the backs all laid out, ready to start marking out the bead rolls on the front end. But before I do that, I think I'm going to go practice on the bead roller. Make sure I know exactly what kind of shape and what kind of space I have to work with to the bead roller. Holy Christ on the cracker, this thing is heavy. I muscled this thing up here, stuck it in my vise because I had the great idea to get it up off the table. But do not sleep on this thing. This thing is beef. Anyway, gotta do a test panel here. First, have to change out the end dies. It's on here now is just a solid bottom and a sharp tipping edge right here. This is what I used on the curved flanges. I'm gonna swap this bottom die out and try out a different forming die. This is just held in with some little grub screws. And pop right off. Here's a lower forming die that I think I need. This little step is gonna cause the material to get pushed down here. So as I'm laying out my panel, from this edge of the forming die, this edge of the tipping die is about a 1/2 inch. I don't know what that's gonna look like. We'll give it a shot. So I laid out this panel, it's a piece of 18 gauge just like I'm going to work with. I'm going to put the tipping die right on this black line that goes all the way around, has a radius, and see where the back side of this bend ends up. This is literally my first time trying this. The only time I ever used the bead roller in the past was on the Cal Combo supports when I did the curved flanges. I'm going to use the inside of the die here, follow this black line all the way around. Got the bead roller running as slowly as I can get it to run and got it clamped down kind of middle tight. Understand with 18 gauge, probably want to make 2 passes on this. Also, you want to start on a straight run. No idea what's going to happen here. Just going to yeet this thing. Alright, so first pass. It actually formed the metal pretty well. Came out pretty well. You can see here that it actually formed a lot tighter bend than I would have expected. That's not a problem. This tells me that I can take my marks on the template that I made on the back side of the flanges and I can get right up to those marks of the flanges. So that's good news. This is just one pass. I think I'm gonna run it through one more time just to see what happens. Okay, so here's the panel with 2 more passes on it. It did make a difference. Probably hard to tell on camera. Thing that's also kind of hard to tell, it started to distort the edges. I think it's a shrinker I need. I have to think about that, but come in with the shrinker or the stretcher, come around the edges and flatten these back out. I cannot believe the amount of stiffness I added to the panel. Absolutely surprised by that. This is kind of the jam here. This is what I'm trying to sort of emulate. These are a lot deeper. These are stamped by a, thanks magnet. These are punched out by who knows how many 1,000 pounds in a press. I can't replicate that, but I think with this setup, I can get pretty close. Professional-ish. Got this inner bed skin cut. Let's give it a test fit. No, doesn't fit for shit. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. There we go. Anyway, got this thing fitting in there, laying up nice. Goes up tight to all the flanges. I trace these flanges on the back side of this piece and then overlay the template that I made that I used to reach through here and pull the license plate box out with and see how they kind of match up. All right, got this all laid out. Red lines are still the flanges and the top tube. Black line down here is where I'm thinking about putting the tipping die like I did on the last piece. This blue line is the template laid over the top to see how it all lines up. Now the template, the blue line for the opening is a little off center. That really doesn't matter. I'm gonna make the bead all the way around and then I'll just cut the center out. I think we're good to go. I'm gonna roll the beads in this thing, get it all baconed up, really screwed up, see what happens. A couple things going on here. Ran this all the way around and of course it did deform. There's a big bubble here. There's a low spot here, another low spot there. Basically taking all these outer flanges and bent them down. So need to get that over to the shrinker stretcher, work that out. The other problem I'm having is on these outside panels, I'm not able to actually get to this edge to make the bead. I really didn't think it was going to be a problem. My bead roller's got a 27-inch throat. At no point do I have to reach 27 inches in, except when I do this edge, that whole length of this panel needs to be swung in toward the motor on the machine. So what I'll have to do is get as much of these three sides as I can, flip the dies around backward, start where I've already run the die and run it around this way. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but that's all I can come up with aside from cutting this into 3 pieces and working each of them individually, then welding them back together. Got the panel in, got to do a little manipulation on it. Ended up using the shrinker on it, that seemed to work pretty well. Definitely headed in the right direction. So now the time's coming to finish this edge. What I want to do is continue the shape of the bedside right here, around this corner. The shape of these S10 bedsides has a rounded section and a little skirt hanging down with nothing up behind it. Use a piece of 3/4 inch plate for this and a 3/8 rod matches the shape of this rounded edge real nice. I'm going to go with a 2-inch radius. This is just what looks right. It's going to come out here like this. A 2-inch radius around here with that upper rod. Let me show you how I'm going to do that. This is a 3/8 rod that I'm going to use to make that rounded section at the top of the bed. I'm going to bend it in this little jig that I made in my table. It's nothing more than a piece of tubing bolted to the table and a 3 5/8 hole saw. I want the center line of the rod to be at that 2-inch radius, so I'm running a little bit smaller size hole saw. Let's see how this works. Alright, that worked out pretty well. It's a lot harder to bend than I expected. The table was moving around. Go ahead and bend the second one of these for the passenger side. Then I've got to put my vise back in here so I can straighten them out, make a 90-degree angle out of them. Now I overbent this 3/8 rod in order to get that radius nice and tight around the hole saw I was using as a mandrel. I need to straighten it back out. So to do that, I'm going to slide a piece of tubing over it so I don't bend this leg of it, hopefully keep it straight. First shot. Definitely not going to get that lucky on the second one. Alright, got both rods matching. The radiuses match. They're both square. Set those aside for now. Next up, use this 3/4 1/8-inch plate to recreate that skirt along the bottom of the factory bedside. Gotta go set up my bending jig, do that all over again. Took the vise back out, got the ghetto bend set up back in. Using that same hole saw as before. Thought about stepping up to a larger one because I thought the radius might change a little bit. Hopefully it's not a mistake. Yep, that's a problem.
Erroneous! Erroneous on both counts!
So you can see the radius doesn't quite line up. Oh well, they can't all be zingers. You guys are probably sitting on the toilet screaming at your phone saying, no, you need a larger radius. As it turns out, I do need a larger radius. Thought I was wrong, turns out I was mistaken. Let's give this a shot. Maybe I'm wrong again, who knows. That's what the kids are looking for these days. Now in order to line up that 3/8 rod with the skirt material, I'm going to use a profile gauge along the factory bedside, try to match it up as closely as possible. That's the basic shape we're going for here. I'm going to take this over to that material on the bench and start laying it out. Got the skirt and the rod tacked together and scribed a line here 3/16 of an inch in from the factory outer edge. That should put the top of this sheet metal directly in the center here of the rod once I cut the bedside out. Got a couple pieces of 3/4 tubing clamped in place back here to keep this running straight and give me a reveal that matches the factory bed rail. So in the end, the idea is this will look like it just continues all the way around as if it was that way from the factory. Got this piece mocked up in place. So here's where I cut the bedside out to merge my rod and skirt for the inner bed. Once I get this tacked in place, I can bend that down get it lined up. Eventually the skin has to meet up with this piece of rod. I want it to be basically flat straight across, and then I come in here and weld this, clean that weld back, and just have this nice roll over the edge that matches the reveal on the factory bed. We get this tacked in place, start lining up this leg of it that runs across the top of the cowl combo. Finally I'm ready to start putting all the skins on this dude. Did a lot of work I didn't record, but we came in and punched holes in this thing. Punch all the holes for the spot welds using this Eastwood hand punch. Goes up to 14 gauge. Use this thing, you just take your sheet metal, clamp it down in there, give it a good squeeze, and it pops a nice hole. Doesn't distort the metal, not a bunch of shavings, works nice and quickly. Punched all the panels that I built, the cowl combo, and all the flanges this way. I also came in on all the surfaces that are going to be touching each other where the spot welds are going and hit it with some weld through primer. This stuff's supposed to work really well, but this will keep the rust out of all the welded areas. Also treated myself to a new lens on the welding hood. Alright, so that worked pretty well. It was spitting and popping quite a bit. You really have to resist the temptation to get your torch really close to the weld. You really want to stand back. Really wanted to pop and throw stuff into the nozzle on the MIG gun. Overall, I think it turned out pretty well. Let's get the cowl combo up here, start tacking that in. Up here on the driver's side top of the cowl combo, you can see the fitment's a little off. Part of the trick to this stuff is sneaking up on it and tightening things up and tacking it as you go to get the shape tight. Starting up here, this side's lifted a little bit even though I've got a Cleco. I'm going to put a clamp there, suck that down, tack it, slowly start working my way around the corner, getting this piece pushed into place. Gotten to a part of a project that you thought about for a long time. Now that you're there, you can't believe you're actually doing it. That's what this is like. So the cowl combo is pretty much tacked up on the outside. Now it's time to go in and weld the inside. You don't sell the steak, you sell the sizzle. That's not going anywhere. Finally going to start filling in these gaps here that were left between the cowl combo and the tail light fillers. Go ahead and make that filler piece, starting with a template. The ram board in there, get pushed in nice and tight. There you go. No big deal. I got this little patch panel put in here. I'm going to start by tacking it up near the top, work my way down, getting it pressed into place. Really want this thing to be flat across here so that I can smooth it out later and make this thing just disappear. Got it tacked into the skin. I'm going to go from behind with a hammer and a dolly, try to get this thing all lined up to the tail light filler. I got this thing tacked in. Fighting 025 wire. Really hate using that stuff. Doesn't seem to run through the welder very well, but we're making do. As I was coming down here, I had to cut a couple of the tacks in order to get this lined up a little bit better. Had to reach in with a pry bar from behind and pry out the tail light filler in order to get it to line up with the cowl combo on the side here. I'm going to grind this back, see what the alignment's like, and if I'm good, then I'll just go ahead and weld the thing all the way around. Alright, sit rep. This is all welded up. Went over with the hammer and the dolly, cleaned up this edge a little bit, tried to keep it from being all bowed up, boned up. The welds don't look pretty. I had to do a lot of jumping around, and I did the passenger side at the same time. Took a couple hours just to weld the whole thing in, try to keep things from distorting. Now I'm going to clean all this back, polish it down, see what we really got. Cross your fingers. Alright, here's where we ended up. Had a little bit of a low spot through here. Did blend it out. I don't dare grind it back any more than that. I'm afraid to grind right through this sheet metal. So that's pretty good. Alright, now it's time for some paint. Everything all masked up. Got some seam sealer across all the welds. Getting this turkey ready for some coating. Now for the coating itself, I use POR 15. Stuff is great. You can brush it on, spray it on. Here's how I do it. Biting these little pints, because the pot life on this stuff is pretty short. You can manage to get your can resealed like if you buy a quart. You may end up just gluing the lid back on. So these pints are nice. You can do a quick little project, throw them away. It's like 50 bucks for 6 little pints of this stuff. POR 15 is going to tell you to reduce this stuff 5%. Now I follow those instructions pretty closely. Just estimate the 5% for the reducer. Now to reduce, I use the POR 15 solvent. This is what they recommend to use. It's worked for me in the past, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. Got about 8 ounces in here. 5% of the 8 ounces is 0.4, so about a half an ounce. That's kind of hard to tell, so I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. What I've found, this stuff's pretty forgiving. What you're really looking for is a milky consistency. So always stir it up. Try not to use any kind of electric mixers or anything. You can actually whip air bubbles into this stuff. That's a little thick. I'm going to give it a little bit more. Oops, that might have been a little too much. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think that's going to work. Now talking about gear, these are pretty serious chemicals and people have died spraying this stuff. So you do have to protect your lungs. I've been using these throwaway 3M masks. They're not expensive. You can get them from Summit or probably even from Amazon. Make sure you do some research and get the proper filtration to protect your lungs. Now, a spray uses Black Widow gun. It's got a 1.7 tip and it's from Harbor Freight, of course. Run this thing at about 35 psi. You do want to filter this stuff going into the gun just in case. Cleanup's not too bad. Use a combination of mineral spirits and the POR 15 solvent. Alright, fast forward a little bit. Got the whole inside of the cal combo coated in POR 15 gloss black. Got the inside of the inner bed skin coated in gloss black also. All the spots where the skins and the flanges are going to touch. It's coated in U-Pole weld-through primer. Next stop in order of operations is to slide in the inner bed skin. Start getting that thing glued in place. Alright, panel's in, cleat goes in place. Got some clamps along the top. Hopscotch some of these clamps around and weld the top of this skin to this top tube right here. Also be going around to all these spots where I punched holes for spot welds. I'm gonna weld this whole thing in now. Alright, skin's all welded up. Next step is to start to attach this upper bed rail detail. Using 3/4 inch flat stock, clamped in place here. Keep that thing running nice and straight so the upper skin can go on. Got these tubes clamped here and here to the top of this rail. The whole top of the bed rail detail flat with the top, but that skin can come out and get welded over here. Ooh, that's hot. Still kind of fighting that 025 wire. This weld-through primer is not really helping a whole lot.
I'm throwing every piece of junk I can think of at him, Skipper.
I'm just making excuses. It's welding okay, but I don't think I'd take him to the state fair. All right, here we are with our old friend, the top skin. Got the bottom of this thing coated in that U-Pole weld-through primer. This is the last piece to go on, so there's no getting back to the back side of this to coat it. Here's how the top skin fits. Spent a lot of time trimming it up, giving myself a little gap to weld here, poking holes in it in order to spot weld it where I can. Along here, it's just gonna be welded down to the cal combo and to the tube down below. I cut the opening purposely large so I can come in here, weld around this edge. That way you can just body work up to the edge with the license plate frame inside and cut a nice sharp line all the way around it. Time to start dancing with this beast. All right, after a couple hours worth of work, got the top skin all welded in. That was a lot of work, a lot of smoothing. Everything's in nice. There's a couple little wobbles in it, but it's ready for body work. Really happy with the way this thing turned out. It's pretty much the end for the back end of this truck. Be sure to come back next time because we're moving on to the front of this truck. Now we're going to get into skinning the inner. So now with this license plate bracket all running, I should put my fucking hat on. Overbuild. No, they're not. Mechanism.